Welcome to Sleep Tight Frights, the place where bedtime stories don't always end sweetly. I'm Evergrey, your storyteller in the shadows. Each tale is a little strange, a little spooky, and just creepy enough to keep you peeking over the covers. So settle in, close your eyes, but don't fall asleep just yet. Tonight's story is a special one. It's called The Canoe That Didn't Float Forward. A tale of old river roots, stories that linger, a canoe that remembers what hearts have forgotten. My name is Evergrey, and I'm a Métis writer. I've done my best to honor the spirit of Métis values and storytelling traditions in this episode. That includes respect for the land and water, family teachings, and the power of memory passed down through generations. But I also want to say I'm still learning. If I've gotten something wrong, I'm truly sorry, and I'll keep listening, reading, and growing. This story, like the river it follows, carries echoes from both the past and the present. So settle in, zip up your sleeping bag, and remember, some canoes aren't meant to be paddled alone. This is The Canoe That Didn't Float Forward. The bend in the river didn't look like much at first, just another curve, another quiet pocket of current, the kind of place Ellie had seen dozens of times during this trip. But as he climbed the low ridge with his pack slung over one shoulder, he paused. Something tugged at his chest, not wind, not tiredness, something else. That's when he saw it. Half hidden beneath a curtain of willow branches, tucked close to the roots like a secret, a birch-bark canoe. Not theirs. Not anyone from camps either. The bark had aged to a weathered gray, the color of antlers long buried in the snow. The ribs of the frame peeked out from the seams, sturdy, uncracked. It looked as if it had floated out of a different time. "Maëlle," Ellie called, not looking away. "Come look." He was dragging their own canoe up the muddy slope, boots slipping with each step. "Can't. Hands full," she grunted. "What is it?" He didn't answer, just pointed. When she reached him, her breath caught. "That thing looks haunted," she said immediately. Ellie grinned, more like waiting. Maëlle gave him a sideways look. "Yeah, waiting to sink." He didn't reply. Something in his stomach fluttered like the silence between two drum beats. The trees around the bend were too still. The water below the old canoe was glass. Even the bugs didn't skate across it. The canoe didn't look abandoned. It looked aware. Their family was halfway through a 4-day paddle along a known Métis route, part Mushoom's teaching, part family tradition. Every summer they came to the river, camping in new spots, following the old curves. Mushoom said their people once carried furs and stories down these same waters. Each night ended the same, fire crackling, tea warming, and Kukum telling stories while the stars pushed through the dusk. "The river doesn't just carry you," she often said. "It listens, it remembers." That night they circled around the fire with their bannock and sweet Saskatoon tea. Ellie couldn't hold it in any longer. "Did you see the canoe?" he asked, looking at Kukum. Maëlle sighed. "He's obsessed. I think it's magic or something." "I didn't say that," Ellie muttered. Kukum didn't speak right away. She stared at the fire like she was reading smoke. "You saw it under the willow, she finally asked. Ellie nodded. She took a long sip of tea, then let out a small breath. "Still there, is it?" His eyebrows lifted. "You know it?" Kukum's eyes glinted the way they did before a story. "There's an old tale," she said. "But stories like that, they wait for the water to speak first." Maëlle frowned. "That's not an answer." "It's all the answer I've got tonight," Kukum said with a small shrug. "Now finish your tea." Ellie looked back at the fire, unsure if he felt better or worse. Later, while everyone settled into their sleeping bags, Ellie slipped outside the tent again, just for a look. Mist crept low over the river like a breath on a cold window. The moon was barely a sliver, more suggestion than light. The old canoe was still there, still tucked beneath the willows, still not sunken, still not gone. But something had changed. Where before the canoe had been shadowed and still, now it shimmered faintly, as if the mist had stitched itself into the bark, like the river wanted to keep it hidden, but couldn't. Ellie stepped closer. The air grew cooler. Willow branches rustled without wind. His foot brushed a small stone, and the echo, just a simple click, sounded too loud, too far. He took one more step just to see the inside, empty, dry. A single feather lay across the middle seat, gray, slightly curved. Its spine was split, like it had once been tied to something. He reached for it. The river sighed. A loon cried out in the distance, once, twice, then a third time. Ellie's hand stopped just above the canoe's rim. 3 calls, he remembered Kukum saying once. That means the water sees you. He stepped back, didn't touch the feather, didn't speak. He just turned quietly and went back to the tent. That night, Ellie dreamed of paddles hitting water, but not his hands holding them. 2 paddlers moved in perfect rhythm, their faces lost in fog. He couldn't hear what they were saying, but their voices rose and rose. And then the canoe turned sharply, knocking one of them into the water. The other kept paddling, alone, in circles. The fire cracked low the next night, just after the last embers of the sunset slipped behind the tree line. Smoke curled into the sky, thin as a braid unraveling. Ellie sat close, knees drawn up, chin resting on his arms. He hadn't said a word since supper. Maëlle was the first to break the silence. He's still sulking. Ellie scowled. Am not, she scoffed. You are, just 'cause Kukum wouldn't tell you the spooky canoe story last night. I'm not mad, Ellie muttered. I just think if a canoe shows up out of nowhere, someone should care. I care, she said. I care enough not to get cursed by it. Kukum stirred the fire with a long stick. Sparks rose like teeny fireflies. You know, she said calmly, you 2 sound just like them. Like who? Maëlle asked. Kukum didn't answer right away. She took a long look into the flames, her eyes reflecting their flicker. There were 2 brothers, she said slowly. A long time ago, paddle partners. Nearly inseparable. Maëlle blinked. What happened? They built a canoe together, Kukum continued. Birchwood wrapped with sinew, cedar ribs curved by the old ways. It was said the canoe knew the river before it even touched water. That's not possible, Maëlle said. Kukum smiled. Maybe not now, but back then, some trees remember the shape of the land. When they carved that canoe, they whispered to it, so it wouldn't forget who carried it. Ellie leaned forward. Did it work? For a while, Kukum said. The brothers went far, fast. They sang while they paddled. One would steer and the other would keep time. They were like river and current, different but together. She paused and the fire snapped loudly. A gust of wind swept across the camp, rattling the tent flaps. But, she said, lowering her voice, they fought. What about? Maëlle asked. No one remembers, Kukum shrugged. That's the way with some fights. All heat, no root, but it was big enough that each swore to paddle alone from that day forward. A loon called in the distance, once, then again, twice. The fire dimmed. They tried, she said. Each took the canoe out, one at a time, but it wouldn't go. The river spun them in circles, no matter how hard they paddled. It was like the water itself refused to move forward. Because they fought, Ellie whispered. Because the canoe remembered, Kukum said. Silence swept over the camp like a blanket. Maëlle kicked at a stone with her boot, thoughtful. That's just a story, she said finally. Right? Kukum didn't answer. The fire flared just for a heartbeat, then sank again. Maëlle rubbed her arms. Okay, that was weird. Ellie looked at Kukum. The canoe I saw, is it theirs? Kukum's eyes didn't leave the fire. Stories live longer than people, she said. Some settle in stone, some in trees, and some, she added, ride the river forever. That night, while the others zipped their sleeping bags and whispered goodnight, Ellie sat up in the dark. He watched the river through the mesh flap of the tent. He couldn't see the canoe anymore, but he felt it. Waiting. Not for him, maybe, but for something, someone. A sound came then, soft. Too soft to be real. A creak of wood, a ripple with no splash, then quiet. He lay down and tried to sleep, but the fire's last words echoed in his mind. The canoe remembered. Ellie woke before the birds. Mist clung to the trees like breath on glass, and the river had gone quiet, eerily so. No chirps, no frogs, not even the usual slap of a beaver tail in the shallows. Just the steady drip of dew from willow tips and the soft rustle of cottonwood leaves above camp. Everyone else was still asleep. He unzipped the tent slowly, careful not to wake Maëlle, who had curled herself like a question mark inside her sleeping bag. His boots were cold, his shirt damp at the collar. Still, he moved towards the bend in the river with a steadiness he didn't quite understand. The old canoe waited exactly where it had been, tucked beneath the willows, still whole, still wrong. He stepped close, brushing past the lowest hanging branches. The gray feather from the night before was gone. Or maybe not gone, maybe never there. The canoe's body gleamed faintly, ribbons of frost or moonlight still clinging to its ribs. He ran his hand along the edge. The bark was cold but smooth. He stepped in. No creak, no shift. It felt ready, as if it had been carved just for him. Ellie pushed off with the paddle he'd brought from their family canoe. The water broke quietly. The river let him drift, then began to turn. At first he thought it was him. His stroke was crooked, or maybe he caught the wrong edge. He dipped again, right side. The canoe spun left. He switched left stroke. It spun harder. Okay, he muttered, adjusting his grip. Another stroke, another turn. Slow, tight, like the river was pulling a string around him, around and around and around. Nope, he said further now, jabbing the paddle deep on the left, but the canoe refused. It didn't rock, didn't fight, it just turned. The river, flat and still moments ago, now moved only to spin him in slow, deliberate circles, like a clock unwinding. Frustration swelled in his chest. "Come on," he hissed. "Go straight." He paddled hard. The tip of the paddle stuck something below, soft but solid. Not a rock, not a log, something that felt like cloth. A sudden thrum vibrated up the shaft of the paddle and into his fingers. He dropped it with a yelp, and then the whispers came. Not one voice, two, muffled, urgent, arguing. He couldn't understand the words, but the tone was unmistakable. One sharp, one low, the same sound from his dream. "Stop it," Ellie whispered, covering his ears. The voices grew louder. Then, just as quickly, silence. The canoe stopped spinning. Ellie sat frozen, knuckles white on the rim of the seat. The mist curled around him like fingers. He glanced down. His reflection rippled, and for a brief moment there were 3 faces in the water. His and 2 others, blurred, familiar, gone. He didn't remember paddling back. The canoe didn't fight him anymore. It let him go, but only sideways, drifting back to the bank like a leaf tugged by wind. He stepped out, shaking. Mud slicked his boots. His hands were trembling, his shirt tucked up his back with cold sweat. Maëlle, near the shore, crossed her arms, scowling. "You paddled alone," she said. He nodded once. "Told you not to." "I had to see it," Ellie muttered. She looked towards the canoe but said nothing. The willows rustled behind them, though no wind stirred. Back at camp, Mushum eyed Ellie's wet clothes and pale face. "You see the river differently when you paddle without rhythm," he said softly. "It doesn't forgive that easily." "I didn't mean to disrespect it." "Didn't have to mean to," Mushum replied. "The water knows what you forgot." That night, Ellie didn't sleep. He lay still, eyes wide, listening to the sounds outside. But there were none. Only the silence of a river that had been stirred. Only the memory of a canoe that spun like a secret, unwilling to move on. Maëlle wasn't speaking to Ellie. Not that he blamed her. She hadn't said a word since she caught him, stumbling back from the river, soaked and wide-eyed. Just gave him a look that said, "You're lucky the canoe didn't swallow you whole." Now they were packing up camp, day 3 of the paddle, and Maëlle shoved her sleeping mat into the sack with more force than necessary. "You didn't even ask me," she finally snapped, not looking at him. Ellie froze. "Ask you what?" "To come with you, to see it, to try it." She turned, hair wild from sleep and wind. "You don't own the story just because you saw it first." Ellie stared. "I didn't think—" "Exactly. She shouldered her bag and stomped off towards the canoe without another word. Mushum said nothing, but Kukum caught Ellie's eyes and tilted her head towards the river. Go make it right. That canoe doesn't paddle well, and neither do you. They didn't speak during the first leg of the day's paddle. The regular canoe, their canoe, cut smoothly through the water, following the gentle bends of the river, but Ellie felt every turn like a knot in his gut. Finally, halfway down a narrow stretch where the trees arched overhead like ribs, Maëlle broke the silence. I had a dream, she said. Ellie blinked. What? Last night, while you were out spinning yourself sick. He didn't say anything. I saw two men in a paddle, one in front, one in the back, arguing. One grabbed the other's paddle and threw it into the river. She paused. Then the canoe started to split, right down the middle, like bark peeling from a tree. Ellie swallowed. That's a lot. She nodded. They were still arguing, even as they sank. They stopped for lunch on a sandbar littered with driftwood, while Mushum boiled tea and Kukum braided dry grass. Ellie wandered back down to the shore. The family canoe was pulled up safe, but the other canoe wasn't there. He ducked through the willows. Nothing. Just shadow and mud and the hush of reeds. And then a ripple from the center of the river moving against the current. Not fast, not loud, just wrong. He backed up slowly. That night, the family pitched tents further up the ridge, under a strand of trembling aspen. No one mentioned the old canoe, but when Ellie ducked into the tent he shared with Maëlle, he found something strange. His paddle, wet, covered in silt, but he hadn't touched it since the morning. He turned to Maëlle. Did you? No, she said quickly. I thought you... They looked at each other, then at the tent flap, fluttering gently even though the air inside was still. Later, when Maëlle slept, Ellie sat alone outside under a sky pricked with stars. He didn't hear a loon call, he didn't hear the wind, but he did hear something. The soft rhythm of water against bark, and laughter. Faint, uneven, like two people remembering something wrong. He didn't turn towards the river. He didn't want to know if the old canoe had found its way back again. The next morning, Mushum stood at the end of the river, holding something in his hand, a bundle wrapped in red cloth. He didn't say anything until both Ellie and Maëlle joined him. Kukum stayed by the fire, humming under her breath as she stirred porridge with a carved wooden spoon. Maëlle's arms were crossed. Ellie stood quietly beside her, still trying to understand why his paddle had returned. Covered in mud, he hadn't left behind. Mushum knelt and unwrapped the cloth. Inside was a braid of sweet grass, a hawk feather, and a teeny carved paddle, worn smooth with age. This, Mushum said softly, belonged to my uncle's uncle. It's the only thing left of their canoe. Maëlle crouched beside him. Their canoe? He nodded. The brothers your Kukum spoke of. They were real. Names were Renard and Oseu. Fox and bird. Fitting, really. Ellie's heart tugged. So the story's true? Mushum nodded slowly. All stories are, if the rivers remember them. He held up the carved paddle. They carved this canoe under a blood moon, used cedar bent with steam and laced sweetgrass into the seams, not just for strength, for spirit. The elders said it was the most balanced canoe ever made. Maëlle whispered, until they fought. Mushum's face darkened. Split it in spirit, though, not in wood. After the argument, they could never paddle it forward again. It would only turn and turn. He wrapped the bundle again and handed it to Ellie. This belongs to both of you now, he said. Keep it close. If you try that canoe again, do it together, or not at all. That afternoon the river was restless. Waves slapped the hull of their family canoe harder than usual. Wind threaded through the trees like warning. As they rounded another bend, Ellie froze. There, he said. Maëlle followed his gaze. The birch bark canoe was back. Only this time it wasn't tucked beneath the willows. It was floating, just off the shoreline, motionless, waiting. No one paddled it here, Ellie whispered. Maëlle's grip on her paddle tightened. Kukum looked over her shoulder from the bow of their canoe and murmured, the river's telling you it's time. They pulled ashore just downstream. The sand was damp but not muddy. No footprints, no drag marks, only two long identical paddles, paddle groves leading straight into the water, and nothing else. Maëlle crouched beside them. Those aren't ours. No, Ellie said. but they match each other, like two people had paddled in perfect sync. He turned to her. "We should try." Maëlle hesitated. "Are you sure?" "No," he said, "but it was made for two hearts. Maybe it needs two again." They left their family canoe tied to a cedar root and approached the ghostly vessel. The air felt thinner, charged. As they stepped in, Ellie in the back, Maëlle in the front, the canoe rocked once, then stilled. Maëlle looked back. "Ready?" Ellie nodded, clutching the teeny carved paddle in his pocket. They dipped their paddles in at the same time. Stroke, glide, stroke, glide. No spinning. The canoe moved forward. The river opened like a story just begun to speak again. But behind them, on the shore, two shadows watched from the trees, unmoving, unblinking. One held a broken paddle, the other held nothing. Then slowly they vanished into the brush. The canoe moved like it remembered now, with Ellie at the back, Maëlle in the front. Each stroke felt like an answer to a question they hadn't known they were asking. The water curved gently beneath them. The trees no longer leaned in with suspicion. They simply watched. Still, it wasn't easy. Maëlle was fast, too fast. Ellie tried to match her rhythm, but kept splashing or pulling too late. The nose of the canoe wobbled. The first few minutes were all jerks and overcorrections. "You're behind," Maëlle snapped. "No, you're too ahead," he growled. "Try matching me." "I am." The canoe rocked. Suddenly, it stopped moving, not turning, but not drifting either, stuck, as though the water itself had folded its arms and said, "Figure it out." "Okay," Ellie said, panting. "Truce?" Maëlle sighed. "Fine. Truce." They took a breath. 1, 2. Then tried again. Right, left, right. Their arms fell into time and their backs bent together. Ellie watched the dip of Maëlle's paddle and copied it. Fluid, clean. This time, the canoe responded. The river widened. They passed trees they didn't remember from the map, cottonwoods older than any they'd seen so far. One had a lightning scar down its center, still alive. "That one's called a keeper," Maëlle said softly. "Cookum told me once. Trees stuck, but still growing." Ellie nodded. "Like stories that crack but don't break." Maëlle turned her head to glance at him. That was almost wise. "Don't get used to it." They grinned. The canoe glided on. The supernatural lingered. They noticed it in the water. Their paddles made no ripple, no splash. Only light, soft golden threads swirled out from each stroke, fading into the current like embroidery unraveling. "Is it supposed to do that?" Ellie asked. "No," Maëlle said. "But I think it's remembering." A loon cried in the distance. Once, twice, then silence. They followed the river until it formed a narrow passage flanked by black rocks. As they enter, Maëlle whispered, "Do you feel that?" Ellie nodded, and the air had changed, still, dense, like sound that couldn't push through. The rocks curved inward, forming a small cove where the water darkened. In the still surface, they saw their own reflections, only not as they were, older, taller, wearing old woven shirts and sashes. The paddles, not made of plastic or cedar, but carved, bone white, like driftwood dried in sun and salt. Maëlle gasped, and the reflection blinked at the same time, then dissolved. The canoe stopped again. No jerk, no spin, just stillness. In the center of the cove, something floated. A braid of sweetgrass, fresh, as if woven that morning. Maëlle reached out and pulled it in. It was warm, still damp from being made. They looked at each other. "What do we do with it?" she asked. Ellie held it gently, like it might unravel from memory if squeezed too hard. "We take it back," he said, "so it won't be lost again." The river stirred beneath them. As they turned the canoe, a soft sound echoed from behind the rocks. Two voices, not arguing now, just humming, low and in harmony. Then the wind shifted and the sound was gone. They didn't speak on the way back, but the canoe knew the rhythm now, and so did they. They arrived at camp just as the sun broke through the clouds, not fully, just enough to catch gold across the river and catch on the ripples like threads of copper. The others were still busy packing up the fire pit and rolling sleeping bags, unaware of what had changed out there in the water. Ellie and Maëlle beached the old canoe gently beside their families. It didn't creak, it didn't slide away, it just sat, like it was finished waiting. Cookum turned and raised her eyebrows when she saw them. Back already? She asked. We weren't gone long, Ellie said. Cookum exchanged a look with Mooshum. You were gone 3 hours, she said. Maëlle blinked. No way. We didn't even eat lunch, Ellie added. You left just after the kettle boiled, Mooshum said, pouring in them tea anyway. But the sun says otherwise. Maëlle glanced up. The light was higher than it should have been, the warmth on her skin sharper, like time had folded while they weren't looking. They said nothing more, just sat, side by side, passing the sweet grass between them. Before they packed the tents, Ellie and Maëlle walked to the old canoe back to the water's edge one last time. Maëlle braided 2 thin strips from the hem of her shirt, and she tied hers to the front bow. Ellie did the same, whispering, "Thank you." Together they set the braid of sweet grass on the center seat, then stepped back. The wind didn't blow, the river didn't rush, but the canoe began to drift. No push, no hand, just slow, smooth movement of something finally released. It turned once, twice, then moved forward upriver, against the current. The water shimmered behind it like a veil. Then it was gone. No splash, no wake, just a hush, like something sacred had closed its eyes. That night they camped further upriver. The trees were different, the air was lighter, but Ellie still woke before dawn. He stepped out of the tent and found the river glowing silver beneath the moon. On the bank across the camp, 2 figures stood, shoulder to shoulder, faint but smiling. One held a paddle, the other lifted something small, a carved shape Ellie recognized. The teeny canoe his Mooshum had wrapped in red cloth, the one still in his pocket. He touched it through the fabric of his coat, felt the warmth, and when he looked again, they were gone. In the morning they found the sand where the old canoe had vanished. 2 fresh paddle marks in the mud, deep, even, leading nowhere. Maëlle didn't say anything. She just laid a pebble on the edge of the riverbank, careful and quiet. Ellie added one too, and then they left, together. To me, the moral of this story is that some canoes aren't meant to be paddled alone. Some journeys require more than one heart, and some rivers only open when you paddle in step. Did you know, in many indigenous cultures, including among the Métis, rivers are more than just water, they're storytellers. Some believe rivers can carry memory, spirit, and even emotion. That's why paddling alone, or paddling out of rhythm, was something seen as dangerous. Birch bark canoes, like the one in tonight's story, weren't just tools for travel. They were made with intention, balance, and respect. Cedar, sinew, and sweetgrass were sometimes woven into the frame, not just for strength, but to carry good spirits. There are real stories of canoes that would spin when paddled wrong, or stop when someone disrespected the waters. Some elders say it's the river's way of reminding us we're not always in charge. So next time you're near a river, listen close. It might be listening too. That was the canoe that didn't float forward. Some stories are made to be shared, others wait quietly until the river is ready. If this tale gave you chills, or made you think twice about drifting too far alone, be sure to tell a friend, leave a review, and share it with someone who loves a good scare. You can follow Sleep Tight Frights on your favorite podcast app, and find even more stories by Evergrey on Instagram. And remember, some canoes carry more than people, some rivers whisper when no one's around, and some stories paddle back.
Thank you for listening to Sleep Tight Frights. It means more than you know, to us and to the things that listen back. I'm Evergrey, your guide through the shadows, and if you felt something was watching as the story unfolded, you're not alone. They remember the ones who listen, they wait for the ones who return. So come back soon. Sleep tight if you can.